What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you for tuning in. It's an honor this morning to have Russel Jackson with us, chef owner of Reverence in Harlem, New York City. Russel, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime,
All right, so let's get into this. We always like the origin story. We want to tell people kind of your journey through the industry. Always fascinated how we find our way into the industry and how we find ourselves in New York, in Harlem, opening Reverence. But give us a little bit of that backstory.
I've been cooking as early as the moment I started walking, and eventually in my college years, I'm like a lot of kids who grew up with sort of on the periphery within the industry. I had family members that were within the industry in different aspects. I had an uncle who owned a supermarket in East Los Angeles, and I worked at taco places and pizza places, and I was a delivery driver. And at one point I worked at McDonald's, which I held the most burgers cooked in a single day.
Yes, even competitive when you work at McDonald's.
Down in Santa Monica on the 4th of July, and sort of found my way into it professionally. Left college to really turn pro. Ended up working in a lot of top restaurants all across Southern California. Ultimately, ended up opening my first restaurant in '94 on La Cienega, just above the Beverly Center.
What was that called?
That was called Russel's.
Yeah.
And it had a bit of critical success.
Yep.
Was rated one of the number 22 restaurant in the city at the time that year. And this was pre-Zagat's, Michelin and all the rest. Yep. And ultimately ended up closing that, went on the road and worked with a handful of different rock and roll bands, with the Counting Crows being one of them. And then through that relationship, ended up in San Francisco, and that was in '99. And I worked for the Black Cat and got a James Beard nomination, and sort of a bunch of hoopla about that restaurant. Left there and took some time off, worked for a couple of Fortune. Well, that's not good.
Blow it up. Hey, it's real life, Russell. Actually, that's a perfect. I want to hover right there a little bit, because when you made the transition into San Francisco and it really started blowing up for you, you kind of had an alter ego. And this is where I first found you. It was Dissident Chef. And you were one of the first chefs that absolutely went like bonkers on social media that I remember, that was very underground. And it very much felt like it wasn't this celebrity chef thing that was put on by the media, but it was like just you connecting directly to the people and telling your story. Tell people a little bit about that, because I think it really matters in the way that we think about communicating on social media as chefs.
Well, and this is something we were discussing earlier. Part of my journey as an African-American chef has been challenging, like most other African-American chefs. And the story's long and very torrid. That I'm about to release a statement, a very lengthy statement that explains some of that. But one of the things that I had to do in coming up with the idea that it was time to build another restaurant, you have memory lapses and you realize, oh, this is a good idea again. Yep. Let me burn a pile of money.
Yep. You want to make a small fortune, start with a large fortune. That whole, yep.
Nonprofits. So one of the things that I realized, that to protect myself and my ideas, but as well as gain a level of deeper acceptance within that community in San Francisco, was to hide myself. So I created Subculture Dining, which is still my underground restaurant, and took the moniker of Dissident Chef. And that protected me for quite a while. And we built a massive following and raised for, the idea was that we were going to do it for a short period of time and raise the capital and find a space and everything else and be able to perform and do the work that I knew we were capable of doing. without the distractions and also not getting arrested because it's, not so kosher. So
how did you understand the medium of communication? As chefs, you get so tunnel visioned into your four walls, right? And you broke through that. You were also one of the first I ever saw doing pop-ups. I had never heard that term really applied to food before. But how did you understand the medium of communication, taking it outside of the restaurant and the kitchen and going broad, big, I mean, national, international, like people are engaging with you in this way? And the anonymity, I think, created this like mystery. They're like,
I think people enjoy the mystique, but as much as anything, I've always believed in the relevance of and the power of hiding in plain sight. And having been years before an underground nightclub owner and a bar owner, and having had my run-ins with the authorities in those respects in Southern California, I understood better how to hide in plain sight. The fact, and again, Instagram didn't exist, Twitter did, Facebook kind of did, MySpace, So, and living in San Francisco, you start to learn, and you're on the forefront of all of what's happening technology-wise.
Yeah, right.
And we did, in the very beginning, we did a lot of grassroots hand-to-hand combat, and that, and then it was like, okay, what are the efficiencies of trying to communicate to people and allow them to have connectivity to us without having to expose ourselves or put me out on the street to do it. And as we started to utilize technology to achieve those goals, we were an early innovator in the space. And the pop-ups were, again, sort of a spin-off of my history, my growing up in Southern California. Some of my favorite restaurants in Southern California and in Paris were underground restaurants. And that if you look at history, underground restaurants were the impetus for the modern day restaurant all the way back to Roman times. So, the Roadhouse, the private supper clubs that existed outside of the state. So just, again, I have foreknowledge of I read a little bit of history. I thought, okay, I have all the technology, all the resources, all the manpower, and it means that if I can sit at my computer for a couple of hours a day and talk to people or be able to interact with them and generate sales for myself and make connections with people without having to be stuck to a telephone or anything else, then it's going to be efficient. It's going to work great for us. I'm now, as I stand, pretty anti-social media in my current status because, we jumped the shark way bad. And now it's just a churning pile of white noise. I think that the importance of being able to tell your story and relate the information and tell earnest stories is really, really important, especially for small restaurateurs. My restaurant, Reverence, which is in Harlem now, is built around an experience which is taking you through a personal journey, my personal journey of Southern California, Northern California, about the food, the influences from the different chefs, the philosophies and ideas around food culture that I grew up with. And we relate the dish to the story, to the music, to the smells and flavors, and that creates an entire experience. And it's very, very personal. And now with the way things are and how we're dealing with a set of very, very difficult conversations that we're all going to have and continue to have for a while, some of those personal stories, we're going to lean a little bit harder into my experiences as an African-American chef that does not cook soul food.
Yeah. Tell me, why was it important for you to open Reverence in New York, being California is where you're from, where your roots are, where you made your bones, making the jump to New York, and then specifically Harlem? Take us through kind of the thought process there for you.
Well, I closed my restaurant in San Francisco in 2013. And as anyone knows who's had to close a business, it's a gut-wrenching experience. And literally the week that I closed the restaurant, Food Network called and said, "Come to New York, let's go to work." And I said, "I got nothing better to do, so sure, why not?" And I ended up doing a stint with them for a while. Part of my agency and network wanted me to be here on the East Coast more than I was in San Francisco. Gotcha. So for a year or so, maybe 18 months, I was commuting back and forth. And it's not as much as it sounds,
glamorous,
fun, entertaining, but it sucks. It's a grind. It gets really old super, super fast, especially when you start waking up in cities and not realizing where you're at, what you're doing, what the weather's going to be like. It's a harsh reality. And, when you start spending more man hours sitting inside of a tube, flying across the country, you just, And it's costly. It's just not worth, like, if you don't have to do it, don't do it. And I got to a place in my life in California and the relationships that I was having that moving here seemed appropriate. And honestly, I felt more comfortable in my skin being on the East Coast. My family's originally from the East Coast. I'm actually the last of my line to move from the West back east. So my 99% of my family lives on the East Coast at this point. Once again. And I met a lovely young girl, my wife, Laura, who's Bulgarian, who lived in Harlem. I had a lot of friends that lived up here. And I ended up, even though I was living in lower Manhattan, I ended up spending an awful lot of time here. And I came to really find a comfort level and an appreciation for what Harlem is and what it stands for, where it's going to. And what I realized was I'm very fortunate that I have a small brain trust of some really, really special friends. And Dominique Kren is my best friend, and fortunately for me, her and my other best friend Amy Moore really kind of convinced me that building another restaurant in an area like Harlem, which is on an underserved community, was an imperative and important thing for me to do because it's what I do, and that I didn't have to do anything but what I do to potentially be successful. So through a year-long journey, once again, finding a great location, which my restaurant is on the most historic and significant block in Harlem, which is Strivers Row. You should look it up. It's a pretty important block in all of Harlem. And if you've ever watched Luke Cage, they talk about it. They reference Strivers Row quite frequently and film there as well. I ended up finding a space on the key corner of that block and a 150-year-old historic landmark building, and got really, really fortunate and wrote a lease. And it took longer than it should have taken to get it built. But we did it, and we've been operating for about 10 months now. And, it's been a bit of a shit show from the start, but we're there. And again, the mandate and the idea was the opportunity for us to provide a top quality amenity to an area that didn't have and doesn't have what we do. There hasn't been a fine dining restaurant in Harlem, let alone, or I should say, there has not been a fine dining African-American owned restaurant in all of Manhattan since 1988. The person that owned that last restaurant was Patrick Clark. So, and that was on the East Side. For me to be in Harlem and doing fine dining California style service is, from my thought, it's rather impactful, and it really is the importance about, like, the common denominator. I've been cooking for over 36 years. The food's good, right? Okay, maybe I toss up a boner once in a while, but for the most part, the food is good. The service is great because it's personable and attentive. It's a 900 square foot space that's a counter service, so it's very personalized and very attentive. But the bigger point about all of this is that this now exists in Harlem, and that we're trying to help to bring healthy, high quality food and style to the upper boroughs. And I hope that more people and more restaurateurs understand and realize that, hey, this is a viable neighborhood, this is a viable area. Why can't we build places up there? And that it's not just all fried chicken and rib joints. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are restaurants. I have a 20-year plus restaurant down the block that's owned by really a historic landmark himself in Londell's. And nothing but respect for that guy because he's still in there doing his thing every single day. But we need more of what I do in Harlem to provide additional artistic flavor and to raise the bar for what high quality food can really be.
And for you did counter service. Talk about why that was important, and maybe also how that's playing out right now, as that's a major need in the market.
Well, a couple thoughts went into the design of the restaurant. It's really built around efficiencies. The importance of making sure that we had a small footprint that was highly controllable by just a handful of people. My thought has always been, look, worst case scenario, if I got to go in with myself and a dishwasher, can I still feed the restaurant? Worst case scenario, if everybody goes down, can I pull it off? And technically we can. It's not pretty. I don't look very happy at the end of it, but we have a staff of, when we're fully complemented, we can't have more than 6 staff members in that restaurant, and we can still crush 40 to 50 covers in a night. We do a prefix fine dining 5-course tasting menu that's prepaid. We were one of the one of the only African American restaurants, and the only African American restaurant in Harlem and in New York that was on the talk system. That's certainly changing because people are moving to their system now because they're seeing how incredibly wonderful as a business model and as a group that they really are. They've been a lifesaver and a business saver in what we've been doing.
That's Knick OConnors' company with Alinea, Grant Achat's partner there. I was just emailing with him a couple of days ago, and he's talking about trying to get 2,000 restaurants back open right now. So they are busy, but
I can't even. I have a personal rep that IT guy that I deal with, and normally I can just call him or text him and say, "Hey, can we tweak this, whatever?" And he's like, "Dude, we got a schedule now."
Yeah,
I'm a little busy. So thanks, Brandon. So, but no, they a lot of people have tried to take advantage of the COVID situation, and now by extension are trying to take advantage of people in regards to Black Lives Matter. And I can truly and honestly say that Talk and that organization has been a real advocate for us. They've stood staunchly behind us, and they've done all the right things, and not just like, okay, we're going to waive fees or we're going to do, but morning, noon, night, or day. What do you need? How can we help you? How can we build this better for you? What can we do? Let us sit back and think how we can better help to serve you. So it's a restaurant company by restaurateurs, and they're brilliant at what they do. So,
some of the best in the world for sure. So you're talking about the statement that you're making, a little bit touching on Black Lives Matter for you, your personal experience, Harlem, New York, the impact that's there is massive. So let's pull on that thread a little bit for you. It was very important, and I've seen this watching what you do and what you say, but more watching what you do. You've been out there connecting with a lot of community organizations, been at the forefront of that throughout COVID, and then now this moment. So talk about just where you're thinking about your responsibility as an African-American chef, as a business owner, as a pillar in Harlem and at large in New York and the industry as a whole. So like break that down for us a little bit.
Yeah.
Where are you at and what's important for you in this moment?
Well, the reality is that advocacy runs within my family. It dates back very far, but like my dad's an anesthesiologist and was the state advocate in California for the modern day insurance laws, and fighting with the governor at the time, which was Jerry Brown, back in the 70s. My dad used to be on television and stuff, and it was always like, Dad's on television. What the hell? So it's in
your DNA then, huh?
Yeah, it's really sort of ingrained in me. And not that I ever thought that it would be something that, I never saw myself doing those types of things, but I'm a bit of a loudmouth, and I feel that if you're trained and you're educated and you have a valid opinion and you've done the work ahead of time to be valid in stating your opinion, that you should step up to the plate and say something. So I haven't pulled punches in different areas that I've been a bit of a loudmouth in, like in California regarding the foie gras laws, being sort of one of the poster boys to get my ass beaten about that.
Yeah, I remember.
But yeah, this state and time and place that we're at in the world today is, a lot of people have said, well, it's really different. And, as an African-American, you in the back of your head, nah, this is just another fucking day. We're dealing with the same crap that we've always dealt with our entire lives. And I can honestly say that I feel like this is slightly different. And my hope is that it is very different and that change will occur from this. Change is actually a really cool thing I've learned in my life. And that we have the opportunity to make things better. I'm going to be releasing a statement in the next couple of days, if not even tomorrow. How and where we're going to disseminate it, I'm not quite sure. I think eventually it'll end up on Medium and potentially on our webpage.
Okay.
But it's a brief handful of small stories, just top line pieces of experiences that I've grown up with and things that I've had to deal with, not just as an African American growing up in California, but also as an African American chef. And there are, and writing it and going through it, it's like there are things that I'm saying out loud that I've never said out loud before, written down before. Wow. And it's a super uncomfortable place to be. Of course. It's very difficult to think about the fact that what I considered normal is, and certainly at the time, being fired sight unseen, or being fired within first sight, being beaten, burned, knocked, yelled at, screamed at, berated, told to stay in my lane, go back to, all the horrible adages, the quantity of times that I've been pulled over, doing simple things like walking, and even here in New York, multiple times in the subways, I've been yanked aside, and fortunately for me, I like to make fools of people. So if you even look back into my Instagram, you'll see all the cops that have pulled me over and then realize who I am, and taken photos with them and said, yeah, these two dicks.
Because your selfie game is famous. You're famous. Like you were one of the first chefs to do the selfie, and you're always like out there. I'm fascinated in that, but that is a whole different topic. But the selfie game is strong, and you use that both for good and then apparently to make people look like fools.
Again, I think someone said, a very close friend of mine said something to me the other day and said, hey, this is not an African American problem. This is a white person's problem. And that it's time for white people or people not of color to stand up and to start to educate themselves and to have a better understanding of systemic racism, of passive racism, of how the world has been and has treated African Americans. And it's a hard it's a very difficult place for people to look and to be accepting that they may have or have acted out in these ways, not even having an idea that they have, you know. And again, for myself, you get so calloused and so worn out from all of it. You start to not accept it, but it just becomes a part of your normal everyday life, and it shouldn't be. And I think we're finally at that crossroads where that more and more of that type of behavior is going to start to get called out. I think that the necessity of inclusivity is important. I think that, you know, and these are all these systemic issues that we take all the way back to the fact that, again, one of the things that we were talking about earlier that I pointed out in my statement that we're going to release is that education has been destroyed. The aspect of history is not being taught. You know, the fact that I can say, you know, you mentioned a handful of names of chefs, restaurant people I've never heard of, and it's disappointing to me. It's horrifying to me. You know, but when I can mention people like Patrick Clark, and people have no idea the impact that he made on American cuisine, that he is one of the forerunners, and that his name should be up there with Jeremiah Tower and Alice Waters. You know, I mean, cornerstone individual that framed modern American cuisine today. That no one realizes who Rufus Estes is. Now, Rufus Estes was the first African-American cookbook writer. And that when you read that cookbook, it's not fried chicken and soul food.
Right.
It's French cuisine.
Yeah.
It is French cuisine, utilizing the local indigenous products to the different parts of the country that he was inhabiting, whether he was in the South and had peanuts, or whether he was in another state and had citrus or tomatoes, and the fact that no one knows, you know, it's like, I learned when I was a child who George Washington Carver was. I don't know how many people today, I don't know any kid that can tell me who the hell George Carver is. But yet every single day they eat something that George Carver helped to transition, you know, or who Augustus Jackson is. You know that the reason we have ice cream is because of Augustus Jackson, a black man. You know, I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on, and all of these things have just been whitewashed, or, you know, not the respect and the homage has not been given. And I'm just talking about food. I mean, we don't even want to go into categories like music.
Sure. The whole thing.
You know.
Well, let's give us some last thoughts on that, because, you know, there are so many people, millions of people in our industry specifically. Let's talk to them, and on both sides of the equation. You mentioned this is a white problem, and how we navigate that, and, you know, what role we play within the industry. So many people of color in our bedrock, absolute bedrock, and the immigrant story, and the people of color are absolutely essential. This industry would not exist, full stop, without those people. But give us a little bit. What's your hope? How do we educate ourselves? How do we communicate to kind of get to the next phase of this issue? Because you did say it is different now. There may be an opportunity. Yeah.
And we're certainly going to be, myself, Dominique, Jeremy Fox, some of my other friends in the culinary industry, Yvonne Lamone, we're all going to be taking efforts to make sure that this messaging and these ideas continue to go forward. And I think that for restaurateurs, I think that, again, and I've always believed that the personal stories are the most important. I think that advocacy and diversity within kitchens, people of color, women, are all important aspects to have those voices and have those people in your kitchen. To allow the level of education for African-American cooks and chefs. This is your moment, and this is the opportunity in time where you can go out and do the hard work and the heavy lifting. Like, I'm the first person to say, give me the opportunity. Yes. I will do the hard work. and that's what has to be done. Like, there are no shortcuts to any of this. You know, you can't turn around and try to be insta famous or Salt Bay, which is, you know,
that's a whole other show, huh?
that those people that are going to go in, dig deep, do the hard work, pay the hours on their feet like they're supposed to, keep their mouths shut, their head down, yes, chef, and do the work and gain the education and expose themselves to new styles and new techniques and new information, and be loving and hospitable, because in the beginning and in the end, the thing that we do is we're there to be of service. We're there to give of ourselves and be hospitality people. That's who I am. That's all I know how to do. You know, I can color it different ways. I can put my opinions out there, and I've paid my dues in the deep end to have the validity to be able to stand up and voice my opinion. But you got to pay the dues and you got to do the work. And again, the opportunity's there. I mean, we're going to be beating on an awful lot of restaurateurs to diversify their kitchens a lot more. I mean, I spent years and years and years working in high-level kitchens to be the only black face in that kitchen. And it was an odd existence. But in the same respect, that's still a practice that's gone on today, and it needs to change. And the other side of it is that African Americans cook more than soul food. You know, I am by trade a classically trained French chef, and it's, again, from French cuisine, sort of is the cornerstone to all others. And there's an argument there.
Yeah. Sometimes for better or worse, I feel you.
But, you know, at my restaurant, we cook French, Italian, Japanese, Hispanic, Korean. And that is California cuisine. And the influences in the place that I take my work and my stories. And I want to see more of us in those kitchens. I want to see more of us in those spaces and at the higher level. I think that you know, organizations like James Beard and some of these other restaurants, as well as I think the media, needs to stop pigeonholing us into this is, you know, it's like, I you know, again, no offense against the New York Times, but I think it's when they put out a story that is built around the top, whatever it was, 15, 16 influential African-American chefs in the country, and that every single one of those chefs represented soul food, to me, it's a pretty racist statement. And they don't even, you know, and the sad part is they don't even realize it. They don't even think about it. You know, it's like, you know, you know, and there are the first African-American chef to win a James Beard award is, or I think multiple Michelin star, is not a soul food chef. You know, I'm happy for Kwame. I'm happy that he's doing, you know, and got such great recognition and is being looked at, but he's doing another evolved form of soul food. And that's, again, like, no disrespect. I think that's awesome. And I'm so happy that he got recognized.
You just want to see more diversity in the expression that, quote unquote, you're allowed to have. I think it's an important statement. And I think to your point,
because the reality is that when you look at culinary history and you look at the kitchens, you look at all the people that were cooking that food and the people that were expressing that food, they look more like me than they did you. And is, you know, somehow that world got changed and turned upside down. And, you know, and again, you look at the 60s and the 70s and the macho kitchens of the 80s. And, you know, I mean, I lived through all of it in California. And I can say, you know, I mean, it was a racist, hostile, misogynistic war zone. You know, there weren't. You know, I mean, there was no love going into that work. You know, it was pretty brutal, and that's how I grew up in the kitchens. You know, but it's certainly not how I know to make good food today.
Yeah, Russell, I really appreciate this. I appreciate always that you will call it like you see it. And lots of people can call bullshit, yet to have the leadership to then create a roadmap coming out of it, that's what we really need. And that's what I've always seen you do, which I think is important. You're not afraid to get dirty, and you're also willing and able to put in the work to actually show the leadership coming out of it. That's what we absolutely need right now. And that's why I'm so grateful to have you on the show. And we'll continue to watch and share any of the messages. We'll make sure and get that statement, everybody, back on here as a comment. Once you have that, we'll make sure we link that up so we can get that connected as well, because it's important. And I really appreciate you being on today.
I appreciate it. And, you know, it's like I said, the most important thing is cook with love and be a good hospitality person every day.
That's it. Purest form of hospitality is giving a shit about other people. That's it.
Random acts of kindness on a daily basis. That's all.
I love it. All right, Russell, be good.
Thanks, Jensen. My pleasure.
Yes. Dissident Chef was just like mind blowing for me, and I'm grateful to have him on the show. And then he's just evolved more and more and more, and really at the forefront quite a few times. If you don't know, look at the history within our industry of Popups, of the Dissident Chef, and the groundwork they laid there, and then going to New York and what he's doing in Harlem. It's important, and he likes to shake things up. I think it's great. And I think, again, the leadership coming out of it is actually creating the roadmap for success. And that's what I know that Russell's going to make sure and do. So, and look back into this, we are going to connect that link up so that everybody can see what that statement is, and look at the work that you mentioned, Dominique and Amy and their whole crew is looking to put out into the world, into that ecosystem. All right, everyone, I appreciate you. Wish you some hospitality today. Cheers.